Okay. Hello, everyone. Sorry for the late start. We'll go maybe slightly over, but not too much. Anyway, my name is Boris. I've been at Google for the last 5 years. Basically, I helped start the cardboard team about 2 years ago, where I built that little magnetic button. But thank you. But this is not what I'm going to talk to you about today. So when we first announced Cardboard 2 years ago, this was 2014 at Google I/O, we announced only an Android developer story. And I was on stage and I was crying on the inside because I'm a big web advocate. And so today I'm going to be able to talk to you about the web story for VR. So we'll talk about why web and VR is a killer combination. I'll tell you about the current status of web VR, show you how you can start developing today. If you're not a dev, we have some tools for you. And finally, tell you some of the things that keep me up at night that I'm super excited about. So, whoa, the colors are way off, sorry. This is actually supposed to be orange. Anyway, so the web has a few very, very appealing properties that I think we can all agree we want to preserve in whatever form that takes. So as you go to any web page, things are secure. You can cross-link between content. It's crawlable by Google and other scrapers. Things can be composed within one another. You can take an iframe and link one frame to another very easily. And content is ephemeral, right? You don't have to download up front. You don't have to uninstall later. And the thing that I love the most is it's an open platform. There's no gatekeeper. You don't need to get any App Store approvals. As soon as you put the content out, it's available to pretty much everybody in the world. But let me get off my ideological soapbox and tell you about actual practical reasons why the web is appealing. The main thing for me is reach. So the fact that you can make something once and deliver it to all of these different configurations is a massively killer thing for content creators, right? And this is a big reason why I'm enthusiastic. Another thing I alluded to is this instant gratification factor. Often when I want to try a new VR experience, I'll go and download a giant 200 megabyte or maybe gigabyte download. I'll try out the demo. It's really cool, but then I'll try it once and I'm done with it. I don't need it anymore. Now it's just taking up space on my phone or on my device or whatever. On the web, this is not an issue at all, right? You load, you unload, you're done. And lastly, developers. Reaching developers is huge. There's a lot of JavaScript developers out there. It's the top language on GitHub. And there's a lot of benefits to development on the web platform. You don't have a compile cycle. It's easy to jump in, low barrier to entry. You can prototype. So to summarize, the web is reach. Reaching developers, reaching users, and this is a big reason why I'm excited. So moving on to web VR. So what is web VR? It's a web standard. It's a collaboration between Mozilla and Google. A few months ago, we hit 1.0, which is a big milestone. And basically what it does is it provides two things. First thing is head tracking. So this is pretty much, for low-end VR, we give the pose, which is an orientation. For higher end, we have 6DoF abilities, orientation and position. And the WebVR API provides that. The second thing is lens distortion. So pretty much all HMDs, you're looking through lenses. The image gets distorted, but you get a higher field of view. So we do this barrel distortion, pre-distortion, to undo that. And the WebVR API provides that as well. So just to give you a sense, there won't be much code here, but this is the second last code slide, actually. So rest assured. Just to give you a feeling for the API, you query the device for attached displays. This might work. If it's a mobile device, you'll have a cardboard display by default. Or maybe if you have an Oculus, you'll have an Oculus there. Then you can get the pose, which includes both orientation and position. You can see that here. And lastly, we can. Okay, is that better? Can you still hear me? Sweet. Okay, and then the second thing obviously is the presentation itself. So you give it a canvas 3D element, which is something you render to WebGL, and then the WebVR API takes care of the distortion for you. People have, despite its relatively recent emergence, people have already been building a lot of WebVR demos, from proof of concepts to like more advanced things. One of my favorites is LA Times demo. They built a nice narrated walkthrough of the Gale crater, which is something that the Mars rover recently roved near, and I recommend you try it out. It also has fallbacks, by the way, to non-VR mode, which I'll talk more about. People are also building WebVR platforms. So Visor, for example, is a way to create content on the web using a web-based IDE and then share it with other people. So, and there's a few of these things. There's photosphere-oriented platforms and videosphere-oriented ones. So it's a vibrant ecosystem. There's also WebVR frameworks. So this example here is A-Frame. And these guys, this is a Mozilla project. Basically, they create a declarative language for making it possible to construct VR scenes. Kind of reminiscent of Vermal, but let's not talk about that. And of course, other frameworks like 3JS and PlayCanvas are supporting WebVR experimental modes. So how do you start today? There's a few WebVR implementations out there. There are Chrome builds, experimental ones. It's also available in the dev channel in Chrome for Android. Firefox has builds, and we also maintain internally, and it's actually open sourced, a spec-compliant JavaScript library so that you can get started today. We call it the WebVR polyfill, and this is basically like a JavaScript implementation of the two things that I told you about. And all the projects that I mentioned earlier, they all use this library so that things work out of the box. And it works, on mobile Safari, mobile Chrome, pretty much enables people to get started today and to ship content. The idea, of course, is that one day we're not going to need this API at all. So it's sort of like a self-destructive library. But for the time being, especially with mobile Safari, we have no indication yet whether or not they'll ever support the WebVR API. So it remains a useful project. So quick digression here, I'll talk about responsive design. The idea here, this is a fundamental idea in web development. Basically, content is like water. You want to take content and make it fit any mold you got. So if it's a phone, if it's a big screen, yeah, thanks. If it's a phone or if it's a big screen, we want the content to lay out properly and look good, right? We want to do the same thing for VR. So there's this idea of responsive VR where we can take a VR experience and scale it back in a way that makes sense for other devices. So even if you have like a VR scene, you can still preview it in mono to some extent on your phone, and we call this magic window mode, where you get a magic window into this world, or you get like a mouse-look version on your laptop. So fundamentally, tool-wise, you're building WebGL applications, and the usual suspects are interesting. So often, a lot of developers will use not raw WebGL, but they'll use something like 3JS, or maybe even higher level, like a PlayCanvas type game engine. You can also play around with Unity's WebGL export, which I've heard is like way better over the last, has improved a lot over the last couple of months. And I think many of you may not be web folks, if I judge the crowd right. I have to say that performance is greatly improved. We can consistently get 60 FPS on, which is, by the way, the cap in the web platform currently. And I'll talk more about this. And so we can consistently get this sort of level of performance for relatively simple scenes in VR mode. Okay, great. So if you're not a developer, you're probably like itching to get out of this talk right now. So let me talk about VR View. So at Google, we've thought a fair amount about how to make VR experiences that aren't just games and entertainment, sort of more mundane cases, like suppose you want to get a preview of a hotel room that you're going to stay at, or you want to figure out if the house you're going to put your down payment on is worthwhile, or you want like a more interactive piece of a news article. We've done this with WebVR, basically, or with VR View. The idea is that you can very easily embed a piece of 360-degree content, be it a video or a photo sphere, and in mono or in stereo mode. So you can take this content, embed it as if it's in a YouTube video through an iframe, and you get this sort of magic window experience right away. So people visit your site, and they can sort of, if you open this link here, they visit your site, and they can immediately like pan around the content and get a feeling that there's something kind of alive in there. We also have some integrations with VR View. So there's a German newspaper that's embedded VR Views. Zumper, which is a real estate web page, and Lowe's as well have all used VR Views. As far as capture, if you haven't tried it, you should check out Cardboard Camera. It looks like a pano capturing application, but there's some secret sauce in there, which actually, as you're sweeping across, it's capturing a stereo image. So in the end, you get this sense of depth once you go into Cardboard or VR mode. Okay, so let me wrap up. We're a little short on time, I think. So I'll share with you some of the things that keep me up at night that I'm really excited about. One thing, so if we look at the web, fundamentally, it's a set of interlinked text documents. But that's just the tip of the iceberg when it comes to the VR web. So I think there's something really interesting about figuring out how to get into VR web, and then what is a hyperlink in the VR world. And we start hitting kind of metaverse-like territory there. And this is something I'm very excited to be exploring in my team. And relatedly, if we follow this responsive design analogy to its end, we want web pages to adapt somehow to VR as well. So what does that actually mean? Do you just want to be looking at rectangles? Probably not. We want to be able to deconstruct a web page and make it appealing in VR as well. And maybe this is some kind of 3D CSS, something maybe 2.5D, whatever it is, I'm very excited for it. So a couple of tech sort of updates. One thing to note is experimental support in the Gear VR for WebVR, which is a big deal. It's behind a flag now, but you can try it out. The early builds are a little bit rough, but I think in a few months we'll have a very functional WebVR experience there. And this is hot off the press, but I'm excited to show you. This is an example of WebVR rendering content using the Vive. And you can see this is just JavaScript content in a browser, and we're hitting 90 FPS. This is a custom build of Chrome, and very, very thankful to our engineers working on this stuff. But you can imagine, basically, at this point, we have full 6DoF tracking of both head and the Vive controllers. So hopefully this makes it to stable soon. Okay, so that pretty much actually wraps up my talk, which is good, because we started late. But I want to make a call out to, I want to first rehash about the web. The web is about reach. So reaching users, reaching developers, and WebVR performance is now good enough for deploying real things. So if you leave with anything, leave with that. And we are hiring, so if you want to work with me or others, we're hiring very actively for both web and non-web VR related projects. So you can come talk to me afterward, or this is my contact info, and maybe we have a minute for questions?
We have about like 5 minutes.
Oh, fantastic. 5 minutes for questions. So thank you. Anyone? Questions? The 60 FPS is mostly an artificial cap. Basically, the way you do these animations on the web typically is through something called request animation frame, which does callbacks at 60 FPS. The 90 thing, I mean, that's a very niche kind of VR type use case. That's pretty much the only case I can come up with. So these builds, they largely, they lift this artificial limit. And you know, we do other clever things like better VSync, etc. Oh, I'm sorry. The question was, I failed. The question was, why is the web capped at 60 hertz, and why is this magical build running at 90? Yeah. Sorry. What's your other question?
Is there going to be cardboard camera for iOS?
Follow-up question was cardboard camera for iOS. I can neither confirm nor deny.
Maybe 2 more questions.
Okay, we have 2 more questions. Yes, please.
Where does WebVR not make sense?
The question was, why would you ever not use WebVR? You got me. Well, so realistically, probably if performance is like super, super highly critical, and you know, WebGL performance is really good. I mean, at the end of the day, you're running shaders through the same hardware, but there is overhead still. Like maybe, you know, if you're doing a lot of math, that might be a little bit slower in JavaScript. So yeah, so hardware functionality is pretty much available throughout. You can imagine like esoteric VR hardware that you won't be able to interface with, potentially. So, yes, question. Question was about the user experience of clicking the VR icon on one of those VR views. Well, I suggest you try it, firstly, because you probably have a smartphone. So pretty much everyone in this room can open this link and see for themselves. But basically, the experience is you click that button, the cardboard button, and then the phone asks you to flip over to landscape mode. And after like a small interstitial, you see kind of like a side-by-side display of the content. And then you put it in cardboard, and you're good to go. Okay, maybe one more question? Okay, one more question, yes. Okay, yeah, a question about integration with the Theta or other capture systems. So, yes, we basically, as long as your output is like rectilinear projected, if it's a mono image, you know, it's 2:1. If it's stereo, it's 1:1. As long as you can get your capture into that format, VRView can consume it. So I believe the Theta does mono, and it's 2:1. So I think it'll just work out of the box. Yeah. Okay. Thank you all. Oh, I'll be around for demos, and if you have other questions, maybe we meet outside of the room.